In a previous chapter, I mentioned I have spent an entire day fooling around with FaceApp and then proceeded to feel guilty for not doing anything productive, and how I decided to mix fooling around in FaceApp with learning 3D and fighting cancel culture by creating a series of illustrations that 1. Require Blender, 2. Require FaceApp, and 3. Promote remarkable people I admire, while I also made that joke level play words with fruits and animals. Well, this is the 4th and last delivery of the Girls with Fruit Animal series, and this time is the turn of the Caucasian beauty. The first element of the mix is Alex Becker, the most woke, billionaire, successful YouTuber, PC, friendly, empty house with a great body, who has a YouTube channel that helps you to be successful and teach you how to increase your wealth. I am not really interested in becoming a millionaire myself. It's not that I don't care about money, I do, but only to a certain extent. The extent where you can cover all your needs and where you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, without money being an issue. And you actually don't need $1 million in order to be, well, depends on who you are or where you live, I guess. I mean, if you live in an expensive country and triggers of happiness for you happen to be expensive, and yeah, I guess you need it, but if you're a normal person, usually you might or might not need $1 million, depending on, again, of all these factors. But you definitely don't need $1 billion in order to be happy. I mean, there is a quite significant difference between those two. There have been studies that show that after you cover all your needs, any dollar that you make on top of that doesn't really make a difference in your well-being or your level of happiness. So what's the point, you know? And well, we also have disadvantages as women. I mean, there is a lot of disadvantage that we have as women that had to do with money. But one of the few advantages that we have is that our value as a person is not attached to the amount of money we make, only to our looks, our weight, our compliance and kindness index. So we need to mind what we say and we eat and have to exercise every day in order not to become invisible, and sometimes not even like that our opinion is taken seriously. But at least we don't have to worry about making a serious buck for people not to call us losers. So yeah. I don't care about being super rich as long as I'm able to live comfortable. I also have this advantage that I'm a little bit cheap in that sense. I mean, I don't need super expensive stuff in order to be happy. If you give me a Balmain dress, and an order of tacos, both of those things will give me the exact amount of happiness. Even when this one is going to buy several thousands of this. So, okay, if I don't care about being wealthy, why in the earth I'm recommending this super blonde peacocky Alex guy then? He is obviously joking when he says that he is this billionaire, super wealth, whatever. I think he actually has those qualities. Maybe he is not the most thing, but he has a certain degree of those qualities on him, and he works hard every day to achieve more and more of this, and I find that very inspiring. I think he's not being pretentious, but rather he is quite honest about himself, what he is, what he knows, and what he doesn't know.
Any tips for people starting a YouTube channel? I'm not really that good of a YouTuber, to be honest. Like I'm pretty average. So I wouldn't like really listen to anything I'm saying particularly well. I do have some friends who are incredible YouTubers, so I do know a thing or two about it. I watch almost all your YouTube videos. Is your book worth a read? No. I wrote it like 6 years ago. I don't know, like a long time ago. Do you have to be a jerk and cocky to succeed in life? I don't think I'm a jerk or cocky. Maybe I am. I don't know. Probably. One of my most successful friends is the nicest, cuddliest teddy bear of a person that I know. So is my second most successful friend. He's just super nice. Just a generally nice guy. So I wouldn't say you have to be a jerk and cocky at all. Most of the people that I know that are jerks and cocky are not successful because they have ego. And if you're a jerk and you're cocky, it's because you don't see the value in other people. If you don't see the value in other people, you're not going to attract great people into your business and company. And you're going to have a nasty place to work. And you're not going to understand how to use smart people, and you're not going to see the value in other people. And if you can't use people correctly, then you're not going to grow and build a great company. Now, I'm not saying there aren't giant jerks that build great companies. Not saying that at all. I'm saying I just don't think it's a requirement, and I think it holds you back more than it helps.
I bumped into his channel by mere chance. I was in a quite dark mental place. The spirit of life when you are kind of just lying down and questioning your existence is like, what am I doing? What's the point of everything? In the scale of the universe, we don't matter or what? And then you get this mental fog that clouds your judgment and just keep you lying there doing nothing. I was in that period, and I happened to bump into his YouTube channel, especially to this video called Dopamine Detox, and it helped me a great deal. Many of the things that he says in this video are a pretty good recipe to get you out of that mental place. So if you happen to be there, or if you are going to be there in the future, just remember that this exists and try to review his advice in there. You're probably going to snap back into reality.
Dopamine is what motivates you to do things. How dopamine works is that it works just like alcohol. If you only are getting little hits of it, little hits will do it for you. If you're only drinking sparingly, taking a shot's going to get you drunk. If you're drinking every night, if you're overloading yourself with alcohol, you're going to need a lot of shots to get drunk. Dopamine is the same exact way. Your brain looks at dopamine like a 1 and a 0. It doesn't think about what's going on. It doesn't look at the context of it, because the context is controlled by your thoughts and what you're doing. And so it's going to look at the dopamine response and look at it as a 1 and 0 without context. That's why your brain will always tell you, eat cake, eat cake, eat cake, when in context, it's the worst possible thing for you. And the simple truth of this experiment shows that the things that are actually really beneficial to you don't give you the dopamine detox that a system designed to give you a hit of dopamine will. So you can play this video game, you can do this thing, you can check Facebook. All those devices I described, they're completely designed to overwhelm your brain with dopamine. And what you have to realize is that dopamine is not an indicator of what's going to bring you satisfaction in your life. It's a 1 and a 0 without context. And so it's very easy for your brain to tell you and keep making you do things that don't make you happy, that don't bring you fulfillment in your life, that are going to make you sad and actively make you sad. And so what you want to do is you want to rig your brain to receive dopamine and love the dopamine from the things that actually make you happy and fulfilled. So how do you do this? Here's what you do. Take your phone. Delete all the social media apps on it. Stop your phone. Stop using it. Put it on airplane mode. Don't use it for a week.
So yeah, I applied everything he suggested. I did see an improvement, and I keep watching his videos ever since. And I like listening to him because he says things that make me see things from angles I have not yet considered. And people who do that are really valuable to me.
So you're going to consistently see losers blame other people for their life. And I get it. I understand why you would blame other people for bad things that happen to you or bad circumstances, because they're out of your control. At least it seems like it. In a fair world, you would only be responsible for the things that you cause and inflict. But here's how the world actually works. If you go out at 12 o'clock at night, you just drive around, you're going to pick up, I don't know, an Arby's melt from Arby's. You're completely sober. You're being responsible. A drunk driver then comes and T-bones you and breaks both your legs and puts you in a wheelchair for 5 years. Whose fault is that? Well, the loser would say, hey, it's the drunk driver's fault. But here's the problem with that thought process. Yeah, it's the drunk driver's fault. However, who has to spend the next 5 years in a wheelchair? You do. So what benefit do you get from that type of thinking? None. So what would have been a lot better is if you thought before getting in the car, hey, everything is my fault. So knowing everything that is my fault, is it the best time to be going to get an Arby's melt at 12 o'clock at night? And if I'm going to, I should probably be extra cautious because I know there will be drunk drivers out who could T-bone me and then put me in a wheelchair. And while it would be their fault, I would be the one who has to deal with the consequences. See, in life, The person that has to deal with consequences is always you. So blaming people doesn't remove the consequence from you. So the number one way you can make sure that you at least have a significant advantage over people who think like this is just blame yourself for everything. If your business fails, blame yourself. If your employee steals from you, blame yourself. If your girlfriend cheats on you, blame yourself. If you're not making as much money as you want, blame yourself. If you wake up every single day having chronic diarrhea from Arby's melts, blame yourself, not Arby's. You're the one eating the Arby's melts. That's rule number one. It's going to give you a massive advantage over anybody else who thinks like that. Because you're going to learn from your mistakes and stop making stupid mistakes. And if you stop making stupid mistakes, you're going to have a much better chance of succeeding. Because you won't make stupid mistakes.
The second element in this mix is industrial designer and technology entrepreneur Elon Musk. Whoa. I discovered the existence of Elon Musk back in 2015 from a video titled "The Man Who is Saving the World." Back in the day, this trend of hating millionaires was not a thing. So, Elon was not hated back then. The big majority of society didn't even know who he was. And certainly before this video, I didn't either. And I got very impressed of what I saw. And particularly thankful for PayPal, because thanks to PayPal I was able to make a living as an illustrator. And a lot has changed from back then up to today. Now, PayPal is not the great service that it once was. But anyway, back then, if it wasn't because of PayPal, I probably wouldn't be in the point of life where I am today. So yeah, when I learned about him as a co-founder of PayPal and learned about all the things that he is doing. I mean, Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City. Back then there was no Neuralink, there was no Boring Company yet. But he was talking about the Hyperloop. It was kind of like hyping back in the day. And of course his first ideas about making mankind a multiplanetary species was also in the works. So I was bedazzled. I became obsessed and started consuming every bit of info I could find about him. I read the Ashley Vance biography. I would read every article that appeared. I would listen to all the conferences, all the speeches he gave, which are hours in length. I went to see him live at the International Astronautical Congress, where he unveiled the details of his plans for Mars. I read the robust content on him and what he does that this website called Why wrote, which I highly recommend if someone wants to have an insight on how his mind works and how it differs for most of us, because he is different. I mean, I know that people like to believe this narrative it is science fiction and that it is a marketing campaign. But if you check the videos, and you know what, you don't have to listen to me, you just have to dive deep into Google, into YouTube even, and check all the content from years ago. I mean, if it is a PR stunt, it's a PR stunt that has been carrying on for years, over a decade almost. Do you really believe that a marketing campaign can last that long? I read every tweet, every retweet, every liked on his account, and yeah, maybe a big chunk of you might think at this point that I'm a fanatic, and well, I certainly admire the guy. I am aware that he's a human being. I don't see him as this almighty idol that is godlike and immune to all criticism. It's not like that. I see him as a very interesting field of study, actually. There's a lot of misinformation too that was a result of a big telephone game where the version of what happened gets repeated constantly, and the more it gets repeated, it gets distorted, and it gets worse and worse and worse every time that it gets repeated. One of those incidents is this rumor that states that Elon Musk came from his father, specifically apartheid emerald mines. which is kind of just a half-truth at this point. His dad did own half a mine, but that mine was not in South Africa, which was where the apartheid took place, but in Zambia. Zambia became independent on the 60s, and Musks didn't got his father, basically, didn't got ownership of half this mine until the 80s. And Zambia at the time did support the opposition of apartheid. And like this, there are countless examples. It's just evidence that situations are complex and there is a lot more nuance involved. And this is not a justification, but a limitation to see things as objectively as possible, which is actually one of the things that Elon endorses. It is called reasoning from fundamental principles, and it's the mindset you learn when you study physics.
I do think there's a good framework for thinking is physics, the sort of first principles reasoning. I mean, generally, I think there are, what I mean by that is boil things down to their fundamental truths and reason up from there, as opposed to reasoning by analogy. Through most of our life, we get through life by reasoning by analogy, which essentially means kind of copying what other people do with slight variations. And you have to do that, otherwise it's mentally, you wouldn't be able to get through the day. But when you want to do something new, you have to apply the physics approach. Physics is really sort of figuring out how to discover new things that are counterintuitive, like quantum mechanics. It's really counterintuitive. So I think that's an important thing to do. And then also to really pay attention to negative feedback and solicit it, particularly from friends. This may sound like sort of simple advice, but it's hardly anyone does that, and it's incredibly helpful.
The last part, he's also correct. Listening to criticism is something that makes you improve, and is something that, just as he says, almost nobody does. Actually, is seen as a negative thing. If you dare to comment on something or correct somebody, it's seen as rude, as condescending, and you are labeled a troll or someone who just wants to correct people in order to look good in front of others. This mindset tends to prevail, especially the artist community is particularly sensitive to this topic. And I think the general public also doesn't take this kind of comments in a good way. It's taken as a personal offense. Of course, there are ways to say things, but I've seen, even for people who are not being rude at all, there is this weird notion that if you're being corrected, it is because the person wants to humiliate you and put a spotlight at your flaws. But here's the thing, you are not your mistakes. Mistakes are just a part of the learning process. We all make them. Making them does not mean that you're a failure. If it means you got it wrong once, and now that you know it, you have a better chance of doing better in the future. And Elon does this with all his products, and is one of the things that sets him apart. He listens to criticism, iterates, and improves. Another thing that sets him apart is that he is not only paying others to do the things, he is also very involved and has general knowledge of all the things that they are doing.
There is a bit of an education process that's needed to understand orbital dynamics, because a lot of people are confused of like, why the heck are you landing a rocket on a ship in the ocean? That seems pretty inconvenient. And the reason is because that going up and staying up is actually about velocity horizontal to the Earth's surface. So there's a huge difference between space and orbit. Like space, you could think of as like, say, being the international waters boundary for the Pacific Ocean. Like if you go, 100 miles offshore, you're technically out of coastal waters. Now you're in the Pacific.
Right.
So it's like technically you're in the Pacific, but orbit is like circumnavigating the globe. Right. It's a really giant difference, and the reason that things go up and stay up is because you're zooming around the Earth so fast that your outward radial acceleration is equal to the inward acceleration of gravity. And so those balance out and you have a net zero gravity. So when you see the space station, the thing that's little sort of counterintuitive is that the space station is actually zooming around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour.
Even though it seems like it's just...
It seems really still, but it's moving really, really fast. To put that into perspective, a bullet from a .45 gun, handgun, is is just below the speed of sound. So the space station is going more than 25 times faster than that.
Okay.
And that's what's needed actually to go up and stay up. And that's why there's the term escape velocity, not escape altitude. There's no such thing as an escape altitude. There's only an escape velocity.
You need to be a certain speed to escape the gravity of the Earth.
Yeah, you can think of gravity as kind of a funnel in space-time. Or think of it like a coin funnel. Like it's very much like that in but it's obviously a sort of a four-dimensional coin funnel. But if you spin a marble or a coin on a coin funnel, when it's far out, it sort of spins slowly, and then as it gets closer, it spins faster and faster. And if you were to start at the bottom of the coin funnel and you wanted to exit, you'd spin it horizontally, and it would spin out, and that's really how you get to orbit.
So how does
the
that
gravity
relate
well
to
is like a funnel.
Why you want to land on a ship in the ocean?
Because in order to get to orbit, all that matters is your horizontal velocity. Your altitude doesn't really matter. In fact, the force of gravity at say the sort of nominal boundary of space, 100 kilometers, is almost exactly the same as it is on the surface of the Earth. It's a few percent lower than the surface of the Earth. So in order to go up and stay up, the only thing that matters is how fast are you going horizontal to the Earth's surface. So you have that outward radial acceleration, or think of it like maybe like tetherball or something like that. It's really that outward acceleration is the thing that matters. And so when the rocket is going to orbit, the only reason it's going up is to get out of the thick part of the atmosphere. Because at high velocity, the atmosphere is thick as molasses. And so it goes up very briefly, but if you look at a long exposure of the rocket's trajectory, you'll see it goes up, but immediately curves over and starts going horizontal. And so at the point at which the point at which the stages separate, there's two stages. The primary boost stage, which is the most expensive part of the rocket, the point at which that staging occurs can be as high as Mach 10. But it's going away from the launch site at 10 times the speed of sound. So in order to get back to the launch site, you would have to have enough fuel and oxygen to reverse out that velocity and boost back all the way to the launch site. And you just don't have, the physics of it don't really allow you to have that much. It's not about saving money on fuel or anything, it's just physically impossible. Because another sort of thing about if you're in space is that there's nothing to react against. So like whereas an aircraft can circle very easily because it's reacting against air, in vacuum there's nothing to react against. So the only way to go back the other direction is to apply just as much energy as it took you to go. If you want to go backwards, you have to apply just as much energy as it took you to go forwards. In fact, well, twice as much, really, because you've got to zero it out, and then you've got to...
So you've got to land elsewhere.
Yeah, so bottom line is this thing is zinging out to sea at 10 times faster than a bullet.
It may well be over the ocean, because the ocean covers most of the...
Oh, it's actually, at the point of separation, it's not that far away. It's maybe 100 kilometers away from the launch site, but it is going like hell in the opposite, away from the launch site. So the only way to really land it is to have it continue on that arc, that ballistic arc, and then land far out to sea on a ship that's pre-positioned to a particular latitude and longitude, very, very precise, to within about a meter. And then the rocket will then go from vacuum through rarefied air at hypersonic velocity. So when it's in vacuum, it has to, obviously you can't use aerosurfaces, you have to use nitrogen jets to control the attitude and position. And then as it starts to encounter the air, we use grid fins, because grid fins look like sort of like a waffle. They work quite well across a wide regime from both very high velocity hypersonics through supersonic, transonic, and subsonic. So it's hard to have aero surfaces that work well across that entire regime. And then, so once the aero forces become high, it uses the 4 grid fins to sort of control its attitude.
To land itself.
Yeah, it's controlling it's controlling pitch, yaw, and roll with the grid fins. And then those grid fins will then position it to where it's fairly close to the ship, and then it will light, in this case, 3 of the 9 engines to arrest the velocity, and then drop to 1 engine for precision right before landing.
Right. Okay.
So
super
that was
hard.
maybe a bit of a long explanation.
No, that's okay. But okay, what we're going to get to is that's super fucking hard.
There's a video.
So why is that important? Why has this moment been important for you?
Well, so in order to reuse the boost stage, which is about 70% of the cost of the rocket, so
Which cost is that? How much is that?
well, I mean, it's sort of on the order of $30 to $35 million.
Right. So you want to save that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I tell my team, it's like, imagine there was a pallet of cash that was plummeting through the atmosphere, and it was going to burn up and smash into tiny pieces. Would you try to save it?
Right.
But the Model 3 in particular is a consumer product. You're taking money from people against a really aggressive production schedule and a huge amount of orders. What are you going to do to hit your deadlines on that, because it's real consumers this time and a big class of people?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is just designing the car for manufacturing. So in the case of Model S, like the Model S was the first time we'd really built a car, a whole car. Like with the Roadster, Lotus did the body and chassis, we did the powertrain, then we did the sort of final installation of the powertrain to the chassis. But the Model S was the first time we made a car. So we were just trying to make a great car, but we had no idea like what it meant to design something to be manufacturable. So the Model S is super hard to make. And then the Model X is built off of the Model S platform, except it's got a bunch of other whiz-bang technologies that make it even harder to build. So, I mean, definitely we want to do the opposite of what we did with the X, which is make something that is going to be a lot simpler, but still a car that people will love. And where every design decision is factoring in the manufacturability, and making sure that when we design something, that you can manufacture it at volume at an affordable price in the schedule that we're targeting. One of the things that makes a car very difficult, particularly if it's a new car, is that it's an integrated product with several thousand unique components. So we are somewhat at the mercy of whatever the slowest component is, whatever basically, I mean, if you say go to tier 2 and 3 suppliers, they end up being several thousand suppliers. So things move as fast as the least lucky and least competent supplier. But just, and you can think of like any natural disaster you care to name, all of those things have happened to our suppliers. The factory has burnt down, there's been an earthquake, there's been a tsunami, there's been massive hail, there's been a tornado, the ship sank, there was a shootout at the Mexican border, no kidding. That delayed trunk carpet at one point.
He also has the bad fame of exploiting his employees, which is not precisely untrue, but is not as simplistic as being exploitative either. Especially because he is the first person to set himself to say the standard.
So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week. And
That's
then
a lot of work.
All those things improve the odds of success.
Okay.
I mean, if other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve.
Realizing it needed an overhaul, Musk personally took over the Model 3 production line at the beginning of April.
We're aiming for really extreme levels of precision, more than any other vehicle in the world.
He says he has resorted to pulling all-nighters at the plant.
When things get really intense, I don't have time to go home and shower and change, so I just sleep here.
I want to see. Where is that?
Yeah, so
I want to see.
I mean, it's pretty boring overall, really.
It's actually cold in here, too.
Yeah, I like it cold.
So you like it cold?
I sleep on the couch over there.
So you're just laying here on the couch?
Yeah. Last time I was here, I actually slept literally on the floor because the couch was too narrow.
Yeah, I was going to say. And Elon, I have to say, it's not even a comfortable couch either.
No, it's terrible. This is not a good couch.
Listen, I have to say, he really is on the case. When you hear about him sleeping at that factory, you go, yeah, sure, right. But I asked employees when he wasn't around, he actually does sleep in that room. And I said, but why are you doing this? It's not like you're out there, you know, painting a car or running a machine. He said, because I can solve the problems in real time. I look at that board, I can see where a problem is, and go and make the correction and go check it out myself. So he's very serious.
What I like hearing about him is he's showing us him making his mistakes in real time and trying to fix them, tweaking. We never get to look inside the clockworks. While, you know, what he's learning about automation matters for him. Who knows if it'll help with the car, but it's a crucial thing happening to all businesses, learning that sometimes you can over-automate, and to watch that happening in real time is...
And also fascinating to let us in when he knows he's under the gun, when he knows that people are complaining. He says, sure, come on in. He's very calm, very confident, and he's very matter-of-fact. He's very matter-of-fact in the way he speaks, but I just think he's terrific and on the case.
His sense of purpose is larger than life, and that's super rare.
But you say you didn't expect the company to be successful, then why try?
If something's important enough, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that, because those guys are, you know, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. You know, I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
Did you expect them to cheer you on?
So they're hoping they would.
Did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated.
Were you a little naive when you thought I can easily build an electric car and a rocket?
I didn't think it would be easy. Like I said, I thought they would probably fail. But, you know, like, creating a company is almost like having a child. So it's sort of like, how do you say your child should not have food?
So once you have the company, you have to feed it and nurse it and take care of it, even if it ruins you.
Yeah.
Do you remember those tiny lizards that used to roam the surface of the earth like several million years ago? They were not that tiny, were they? They were huge and super scary. And even like that, they were wiped from the surface of the earth because a tiny little rock that was also not so tiny decided to fall on the surface of the earth and made the atmosphere super thick, and just like that, bam, 90% of the species of the earth just died. If that will happen nowadays, we are not prepared for that. The scary part is that this is just one of 5 incidents that have happened in the history of the planet that have wiped successfully over 90% of all the species that were alive at that point. Almost all the species in the planet vanished forever. And if we take a look at the timeline proportion, we are not too far away from the next one. The good news is that at this scale, the range stretched by the thousands of years. So yeah, you're talking about the scale so big. So is it going to happen 3,000 years from now? Is it going to happen in 30 years from now? Is it going to happen 3 years from now? Good luck figuring that one. So yeah, the same way you will upload all your data to the cloud in order to keep it safe just in the eventual happening of, I don't know, maybe a fire or a electrical voltage frying up your hard disk. The same way, Elon is trying to make a backup for the human race, and he is trying to store it in another planet in case something funny happens to Earth. It is an insanely heavy task to achieve. He for goddamn sure is not going to be able to do it alone. For those who are worried that the space exploration is going to be privatized, that most likely is not going to happen. He is going to need the help of every single entity in the surface on Earth and then some that has a space exploration program in order to achieve this. Just for comparison, let me use the same analogy that the tractors are loving to use regarding billionaires. 1 million seconds is equivalent of 11 days. 1 billion seconds is an equivalent of 32 years. This is a nice way to put big numbers that are hard to grasp into perspective. Now, here is another comparison. The distance from Earth to the International Space Station is 408 kilometers. The cost to send one astronaut to the International Space Station, these are prices for SpaceX. I think that NASA prices are even higher, but SpaceX is expending $55 million just to send one person to the International Space Station. Elon has a net worth of $87.9 billion. If we do the ridiculous oversimplification of assuming that's money he has available to spend on a whim or whatever he pleases, which is not remotely the case, but just for the sake of this mental exercise, let's assume it is, then he will be able to send roughly 16,000 astronauts to the International Space Station just with his wealth alone. Now, the distance from Earth to Mars is 71,904 million kilometers. So, for comparison, 408 seconds, which is the distance in kilometers to the International Space Station from Earth, is 6.8 minutes. 71,904 million seconds, which is the distance in kilometers from Earth to Mars, are 2,280 years. So, if you want to count in seconds the equivalent of the distance from Earth to the International Space Station, you will have to start counting 7 minutes ago. If you want to measure the distance from Earth to Mars, the equivalent in seconds, you will have to start counting 260 years before Christ up to today. So we will need 110,272 Elon Musks in order to send one person to Mars. He wants to send a colony of 1 million people. So yeah, the guy thinks big. And you might say, why on earth are we wasting money on this when it's clearly impossible? When this task might require all resources on Earth and then some in order to be carried out. To me, this will be kind of like the equivalent of current you taking care of older you. So when you're young and you decide not to spend on that Starbucks latte and instead saving that money on a fund retirement, so 60, 70, 80 years old you has a nice retirement plan. It's kind of like that. Obviously, if you will ask young you who is crippled with the student debt to pay what an older person needs to have a decent retirement, it's probably going to be impossible. I mean, it's a lot of money. But if you make small down payments across several years, little by little, you eventually will get, and you make smart choices, and you optimize here and there, and you invest, and you do something to grow that money, then you eventually will get to that future where older you will have a nice retirement. So this is kind of like the equivalent of this. Elon is paving the way so people from the future have a road to walk and get there eventually. Maybe we are not going to be able to see this on this generation or the next, but maybe the children of our grandchildren will be closer to a safer future if we start paving the road since today. And I think this is what he's trying to do. I know that he is receiving a lot of hate as of late, especially because of this billionaire thing, but there's another concept that I'm not exactly sure that people understands properly. I think when we are talking about net worth, we are not taking into account that there is a difference between liquid net worth and proper net worth. And net worth is taking into account money that is in shares, that is kind of like imaginary money in a sense. It's just like estimations of how much will it worth, and you will need to sell all the shares in order to actually have that tangible money. And most of that money is not really available for them to dispose in a women whatever they want. They are usually injected in the beans of their companies, keeping them alive.
Toyota Meister said, what's my net worth? I guess if you were looking at the valuation of my SaaS company, $30 million. But I mean, that's all hypothetical. So we could just say $0 if you want. Like my net worth really isn't, I don't think it's really what people understand. Like people say Jeff Bezos' net worth is like $190 billion. That's not cash. That's not money he has laying around. That's his amount of money in his stocks. So do I have like $30 million just laying around? No, I don't.
The closest analogy that I can come up that is equivalent for us as artists is maybe a sketchbook. Let's imagine that you have a sketchbook full of illustrations. And just to put a random number, let's imagine that you sell each one of these in $100. And you have 100 of them in this tiny book. Then potentially you will have $10,000 using here alone. But do you actually have $10,000? No, you have a sketchbook with the potential for $1,000. So you can't go to Walmart and do your grocery shopping and then, oh, it's $50. Oh, there you have half a watercolor paint. You can't do that. You need to find somebody or several somebodies who buys each one of the illustrations on this sketchbook in order for you to have the actual $10,000. Right now, you only have the potential of $10,000. Now, is that going to be the $10,000? Is it going to be 5,000? Is it going to be 200? Is it going to be 0? Who knows? Probably we will need to cut people some slack, or at least wait before casting stones. Just make sure that you are casting a stone for the right reasons and what you believe is actually how the things work. So, yeah, I took their handsome faces, mashed them in FaceApp, put the result on a 3D model, then I took that 3D model to Photoshop to make it prettier, and this was the result. Okay, I have way much more footage on this video that I had in previous ones. I felt a little bit guilty for that, but apparently when it comes to Elon Musk and his stuff, there is a lot to talk about, and this is not even scratching the surface of everything that you can talk about the guy. I mean, there is so much controversy, he has done so much stuff, and well, I'm actually open to dialogue. There are public criticism about him. He recently, well, he didn't say, somebody else said that, but he agreed. that if you pay top dollar and top benefits, you will attract the wrong kind of people. You will attract the kind of people who is interested in money, and you want people who are passionate about what they do. And I am not sure I agree with this take, because there is a difference between people who are passionate about working for Elon Musk and people who are passionate about engineering and solving problems in general. So, if he wants, ideally he will want both, but if he has to choose between somebody who is passionate to work for him and somebody who is passionate to solve problems on the hard fields that he is venturing into, he probably wants the later group of people. And those guys might just be super happy on doing that on their own and on their leisure time and on their own terms. And the only way you can lure them to do that for you is to give them top-notch benefits and salaries. So Elon probably will benefit on rethinking that strategy. Anyway, just a sense of somebody who doesn't know shit about things. So yeah, thank you for watching, guys, and this is it. I'm closing the series with this one. Has been fun. I think I'm going to disappear from the internet for the coming 2 months because I'm pretty much burned out. Thank you for sticking out and enjoy your day. Bye. We need to wait for the seller to leave. Oh my god, 8 minutes. I haven't got to the Elon part yet. That was going to be the long one. It's hot in here. It's not supposed to. It's September.